We are back with another episode of Middle Age Mamas.
Hello.
We are all here. We have Dawn, Camila, and an awesome guest today, guys. We have Dr. Smith here.
Really?
Because I was saying
Dawn
Dawn
Smith.
I'm not thinking about your husband. Dr. Scott is here to fill us in and give us all the ins and outs on getting our children ready for college, that whole process. But before we start, we have to get into a little bit of I'm too old for this, because this week I am still struggling with TikTok. So I've officially said I am
You're too old for TikTok?
Yeah, I quit. I'm just not going to do it.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not going to do it. I know you love it so much, but
Who loves it so much?
you love it so much. The last
When did
episode
I
you were
say
talking
that?
about
Well,
all those.
I talked about the pimples. I didn't say
That's
I love
on
it so
Tik.
much.
Oh, that's on TikTok.
But I don't love TikTok so much. I just love, well, I don't love watching the pimples being pop. I enjoy it. It is my guilty pleasure.
Okay, apparently I am too old for the time to be changing, because
Right?
cannot get it together. I am asleep at 5, I wake up at 2, can't go back to sleep, and then I get back to sleep, and then I'm like, oh my god, it's time to get up already?
Right?
The time change, I'm too old for that. And I hate to fold clothes. And I'm not just folding my clothes, but I'm folding my son's clothes. I'm too old to be folding two people's
That's
clothes.
right.
I'm too old for that. And it's a
He's
battle.
old enough
It's a
to
battle,
learn.
though. It's a battle. Like now, like today or last night, rather, I folded his clothes and my clothes, and so he's gonna pay for that. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but he's gonna pay for me having to fold his clothes.
Wait, why is he folding his clothes? Why don't you just
He
put them in
won't
his room?
do it, and you know what? It's about picking your battles.
Yes, for
And
sure.
when I get home from work or when I get off of, doing whatever I'm doing, I don't feel like arguing with you and calling you into my room to fold these clothes 11 times. I just don't have time for it.
Right.
So I'll fold the clothes, but you're going to pay in the back end. I'm going to take something. You're not going to play on a video game for the day, because I shouldn't have to do, I shouldn't have to do your chores too.
Right.
So that's it.
That's a good one. That daylight saving time is real though.
I can't.
Because I was actually looking forward to it this time around. I was like, oh, it's gonna be lighter in the morning. I'm gonna work out before I leave for the day.
It always
I
does
feel
in the
like
end,
they
though.
tricked us, because at 6 it's dark like it was 3
At
weeks ago.
5.
So what is really going on? It's not bright and sunny like it was 5 years ago.
I
It's
can't get
pitch black at 6 o'clock. So you're right on daylight savings.
Yeah.
I hate it. What you got, Don?
I am too old for sitting on hard bleachers
Right.
during these kids' games.
Right.
My hips, my knees,
Your butt. All of it.
my bootay. Nakia was laughing at both my husband and myself
Yes.
during games, because
Girl.
we had to keep taking like old people stretch
Every
breaks.
time the quarter ends, here they go getting up standing, just stretches.
They
hard.
are so uncomfortable. So I'm too old for that, and I'm at the point of needing. Now, when these families come in and they have like the backpack seats,
Yeah,
the cushion with like the
You can
back.
get those from Big Five.
yeah, we need to get some of
Big
those.
Five and Dick's.
Yeah.
That's what I need.
We've been saying that for the last 7 years, because
Or
all throughout
Amazon.
Little League
Amazon has
I've
some real
been
cushy
suffering
ones.
with the bleachers, and I was like,
Yeah.
we're at the school now, 5 times a week practically watching these games.
Too much. And I
Yeah.
used to have just like the cushion that you would put on the seat.
Mhm.
But I'm sure during a move, during a yard sale or
Right.
something, it got thrown away. But I'm ready for like the full on look where it's like a backpack, like a backpack.
On the cushion.
Oh
Right.
yeah,
Right.
That's what I'm too old for, sitting in them bleachers.
Well, we know what we're gonna get her for Christmas now.
I know, right?
Ask
So
and you
personalized
shall
special ones.
receive.
There you go. There you go.
You got one for us?
I do. Well, listen. I'm too old for late night entertainment.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like, I need to be in the bed by a certain time. I never
Yes.
thought I'd be that person,
Oh,
and
yes.
now I'm like, this is nice, but what time you finish, Jill? Like, sing the song we came for,
Right.
because now I'm ready to go to sleep. Right? especially if I have to wait for you to come out. Like, I'm too old for that.
Oh,
like, come on
Right.
out.
We don't need the anticipation.
Because the show
Give me
usually doesn't start right at 8, 9
Exactly.
Yes.
So then, I was at a concert the other week and it was like 1 in the morning, and I'm like,
Oh,
listen.
no.
Who came out at 1 in the morning?
Yes.
Who?
Lauren.
Oh!
No, Lauren. But she ended by 1
ended.
because she came out like
Wait,
she
were
ended
you
by
the
1.
group that she went off on talking
No,
about?
no, I was
having
at the
to be
forum.
here?
I could
Oh.
walk to the forum. So yeah, no.
Oh,
But when we did get to see her get her diamond award
Okay.
for
Oh,
she got a diamond, and there
cool.
apparently less than 100 people have ever had that experience. So that
Oh,
was
wow.
kind of cool. They brought some people out, but yeah, I'm over it.
How was the concert aside from that?
Right.
Her sound was kind of weird at the beginning.
The way her voice is sounding, or just
well, I think
sound
what
of
it
it?
was is her voice was raspy, like having been singing so much, and the band was there for them. They were not there to back her. They were having their own moment.
Oh.
And so they were overplaying her.
Oh.
And so you could see her, I'm like, if I'm getting the church signal for her to turn her sound down, the musicians don't, y'all don't see that? Like, I see the signal.
Wow.
She didn't stop the
She
show
doing
and
the
check
band.
She seemed like she would stop the
She
show.
didn't stop the
No,
show and
she
check them, because I was
wasn't.
at a show before where she stopped the show, turned off the lights, checked them, and then came back.
No, she did do a
Wow.
whole thing where she just asked them to stop playing, and she just sang, and it was much better, honestly. Now the band was great, but she did the acapella thing, and I was like, yeah, can we turn the band down? Because I feel the same way. So they were just way too loud. They were turned up way too much. So my husband knowing sound, then we're always like, fire the text. That's our thing when we're going to concerts. Fire the text.
Right.
Like, you can't get the sound right,
Right.
So,
Then you
but
need
yeah,
to go.
I was just after a while on a Sunday, and we all gotta go to
Oh,
work
yeah,
on
yeah.
Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm too old for that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I'm too old for that.
Although we're too old, we still gotta deal with it.
Exactly.
Except for
Right.
TikTok, I'm done. Shout out to Jenny, who's gonna take over TikTok.
Well, so Dr. Scott, our guest, and I love calling her Dr. Scott. We were colleagues for a very brief time, and when I met her, she introduced herself to me as Dr. Scott because she thought I was someone else, like from the district or something. And so ever since then, I've just been calling her Dr. Scott. For one, if somebody has their doctorate, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's a PhD, a MD, a PsyD, a EDD.
What about if you bought it?
Right, honorary.
Right.
I'm a call because I know the time and the expense of it.
Right.
So I give the respect. But Dr. Scott is a college counselor who knows all the stuff. And in this season of college application process, I thought it would be wonderful to have you on today so you can share some of your knowledge, answer some of our questions, share some of your funny stories, I'm sure, with parents and kids. But just tell us, how are things going for you in this season? Is it all that you hope that?
Y'all pray for me. Okay, so
We will pray for you.
So one of the things is, and I've done this for a very long time, and
Like 20 years, right?
Yeah, and it is my passion.
Yes.
Right. So I do love it, but it is definitely a challenge during this time. I think one of the challenges for me is that I'm at a very large high school, and depending on where your demographic is, how much people know already, what you have to fill in, then it determines what that year looks like,
Yes.
right? What are you building? So I've gone to schools who thought they're like, we wear college t-shirts, so we have a college going culture. And I'm like, no, you don't. You got people who wear t-shirts. You got a couple of top tier kids that go to college. That is not a culture. So it's when you're building the culture, it's really when there's a lot of work to do. And what are the gaps between when there was a culture, if ever, and then building one. So that is really kind of the challenge. And to be honest, it's very niche. So there aren't a lot of people. You have counselors and you have
So many
people
counselors.
that they throw into the position, and they're like, all right, are we supposed to just get on the bus and take a college trip? And you're like, no,
Right.
absolutely
Right.
not. And so I think that that's the biggest challenge, right? Because you spend a lot of time having to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it, why it's important to do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And I think that's kind of the biggest challenge. So yeah, we're knee deep in public school applications. So we have 6 school days or something left before apps are due, because they're due November 30th. So so yeah, it is. Y'all pray for me. Yes.
And not only are you a college counselor, but you are also a parent of a college student. So
am.
you know it from a counselor perspective, but also as a parent. And
Yes.
so how was it for you doing this with your daughter? Because I feel like our kids think, oh, you're just mom.
Right.
You know, and maybe sometimes they don't even want our help. Like, was your daughter like, I got this, or were you kind of helping her?
Oh no, not at all. Not my precious angel. She listened to everything I had to say.
I had to say that.
Right.
So absolutely, like I was like, people pay me to do this,
Right.
and I consult on the side. Like, people pay me really good money to do this, and it was just like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a parent. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. And I'm like,
Right.
I do this every day. Like,
Right.
what do you
Every
mean
day.
it doesn't work like that? So I think it's definitely easier to college counsel than it is to go through the process with your own child. Absolutely. That's the biggest challenge.
Right.
And I still have to do this a couple more times. So
Now, since you are a college counselor, her growing up in elementary, junior high, all that, how did you prepare her, because you knew what you wanted the end result to be?
That is a great question. And the funny thing is that she was her own island. And so people thought it was because, and of course she had been in an environment, right? So I think that was just the proximity alone kind of built that for her. But she was, my kid was in the 7th grade, and she was like looking at the demographics to schools and was like,
Oh, so she's another one that just knew what she wanted and went after it.
And she was just like, Mom, she was like, did you know that Duke and Stanford only have like 4% African American? I was like,
Wow.
Absolutely. And so that's when I introduced her to HBCUs, because she was just curious about like, well, Mom, where are all of the black students? Why?
Right.
How is that? Like, she didn't in her 7th grade mind understand
Right.
how that could be a possibility.
Mm.
And so when I introduced her to it, she started doing her own research. Now I, was like, these are websites you can look at. And so I introduced her to Big Future on College Board, and she just was kind of went for it. She started doing her research, fell in love with Howard, and that was just kind of her journey. She had other opportunities, and that was just kind of, she had her mindset on that.
But backing up, when she was little, were you the type of parent who was like, you're going to read by 4, you're going to this, you're going to that? Was it that tough, or did you just let her figure it out along the way, and when it came time for like junior high and things like that? I'm just curious.
So her school, when she first started, kind of had that kind of embedded in it, which was good. So they were in elementary school, and they were like, every school, now she won in elementary school for like the best college presentation on her own. I didn't even know they had done it.
Oh,
And
wow.
so she was just kind of that, she was vested that way. But the funny thing is, when she got to be a teenager, we had this whole conversation. She's like, so Mom, how would you feel if I didn't go to college?
Oh, they all throw that out there.
Right?
Yes,
So I
here
was
we
like,
go.
so I said, listen, you don't have to go to college. Everybody has a different path.
Absolutely.
You have a choice. We have a choice with everything we do. So here
Right.
are your choices. When you turn 18, you need a place to live.
Right.
You need food.
Love it.
And that cannot be my home. So you don't have to go to college.
Right.
But know
Right.
that is available to you, and they offer both.
Right.
So that you may
Right.
want to consider it. But
That's
you
such
don't
a
have
good
to.
way to put it, because
Right.
so many people just think, oh, I'm gonna let my kid live with me until they feel like moving out, or they cripple them into thinking that they
Right.
can't move out because,
Right.
what you gonna do? What you gonna do? But to lay it out, these are the two options.
These are your options.
What?
Your options.
Where are you going?
Right.
It's necessary,
Right.
especially now with these kids.
Well, I just recently heard that they're like, oh, you have so many more adult children that are staying at home and who aren't leaving,
Mm-hmm.
and you have this, whole, in this generation especially, and this is kind of, I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it's a change in how I'm seeing the job that I'm doing, is because a lot of these students are like, I don't need college to be successful, because I can be an Instagram star.
Yeah, it's an entrepreneurial age.
Yeah, I can do this, and I acknowledge with them that your generation is raised quite different from our generation, right? So we were told you get a job, or a career, and you stay there, and make sure it has good benefits, and you're loyal to that thing, and you do that thing for however long till you retire.
Right.
And this generation, they're expected to have several careers.
Yeah.
That's the Department of Labor says they are going to have several careers, not jobs, careers. That's the expectation. And so, and we're training them. You have to think about things move at such a different pace than when we were younger. So for them, it's like, if I have a student now, I'll use game design. Game design didn't exist as a college major 10 years ago. So I'm preparing you for something that doesn't exist down the road. They can't say now, my students that were when they were middle school, and you're asking them, what do you want to be when you grow up? You can't say, oh, I want to be an AI developer. It didn't exist.
Right.
But now it does.
Yeah.
And so that's the difference in how, you're allowed. We had I'm an English major, I'm a philosophy major, I'm a math major. Right now it's like, oh, molecular biology with a cellular emphasis. It's so much broader, and there's so many other things that they're preparing for. So the approach is different.
Wow.
Yeah, the approach is different. And so you see a lot less students actually opting to go, and they are more conscious about the money portion. Like, I don't want to go into debt. I don't want to have that experience. So what ways can I approach this where I don't have to pay? And if they see like loans in their packages, we get students all the time. We're like, oh no, I'll pass.
Right. I have a question to speak to that, because this morning I was talking to a gentleman about going to junior college first, and then transferring over to another 4-year college to finish out. Do you think it's more advantageous to do the 2-year and then go into the 4-year, or how do you look at
So
that?
I think it depends on the student situation. So here's the thing about community college. So everybody's selling a promise. LA Community College got a promise, Santa Monica got a promise. Everybody has a promise. You can go here for free and then transfer. And so, number one, in most cases, they don't get out in 2 years.
Right.
And so if they're qualifying for monies that are free, regardless of whether they're going to 2-year or 4-year, that money only lasts so long. It's only so many years they could use that money. So if you mess around and you stay at a community college for 3-4 years and then transfer, and then you have another 3-4 years, then you can time out and you just delaying your cost.
Right.
And so in that case, did it really help you or benefit you? The other thing that I think to consider is, if they're first generation college students and they're going to start at community college, when they transfer, they're starting all over again, and they're still unfamiliar. But now they're in a class of students who have been there 2 years, have kind of gotten to know the ropes. They now have some sort of understanding of what this is. They're going to go, and that's a whole different, playing field. So they're going to get there and start all over again, right?
Yeah.
And so then that's another challenge that they're now going to face. And when you don't know, and you can't call your mom or your dad and ask them those questions, and then they're lost, then sometimes they don't make it through. So sometimes that isn't the best case. Right?
And let's also talk about just the shitty feeling of you're with 4 or 5 friends that are all going off to college, and you're the one staying home and not.
And the other piece of the junior college, I think a myth about it is that I think students think it's easier.
Absolutely.
They think that it's easier. And I will tell you, I would take
Easier
courses,
as in the class,
the academic,
Yes.
and the rigor, thinking that it's easier going to a community college. It is not easier.
Yeah.
I would take courses at a community college over summer break, or typically during my breaks to save money.
Mm-hmm.
But those courses will be even. I feel they were even more difficult, even more challenging than my classes at the university. And so I think that is certainly a myth.
Absolutely.
And I know I talk to my students about that as well. They're thinking, this is going to be easier if I do this, and that is certainly not the case.
And so I've never really heard that part. But what I have heard is that it might be a good idea to start off at a junior college, because if you're undeclared or you don't know exactly what you want to do, it's a good place to take your core classes and complete it. Especially if you're serious, get it out of the way, and then transfer over to whatever 4-year college you want to go to.
But you can do that at a 4 year as well.
Yeah, you can. But I was thinking that it would save
Mm-hmm.
money because you were going to a less expensive school.
While you're trying to figure it out.
While you're trying to figure it out.
Well, here's the other thing too that I don't think that people think about is when students are getting scholarships to go to college, they're generally first-time freshmen. They're
first generation?
No,
to
first-time
college?
freshmen.
Oh, okay.
So if you are going to first start at a community college and then you're going to transfer, there are a lot less monies available for you as a transfer student than there are as a first-time freshman going to And so that's why I said that you could just be delaying cost. It may not necessarily, and sometimes they may be renewable 4-year scholarships, but you can't get it as a transfer student. So for example, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has a scholarship that covers the tuition or full scholarship for 4 years to whatever university they get admitted to, but you can't get that as a transfer student.
You have to be
so then if I was gonna so if I was gonna go to a 2-year and I say those 2 years, but then now I have to pay for the last 2 years out of my pocket,
You didn't really save anything.
I didn't really save anything.
Right.
That's a good point. I never heard of it like that.
Yeah, and the other piece, and I know we talk to students about it all the time, if your concern is money, if your family doesn't have money, if they can't afford to pay, that's even better. Your tuition is going to be covered 100%.
Absolutely.
The less
Because
you
what
have,
your parents don't
absolutely.
qualify for.
Your contribution, your parents' contribution, in most cases will be zero. And so that's the other piece when kids say, I can't afford to go to college. The only way that's going to be someone who's in a position like me, like my children, because my children are not going to be able to qualify for federal aid, and so they will be able to say, I can't afford to go because my parents can't. My parents aren't going to take a loan out. I would have to take a loan out as a parent. Or I would have to pay their tuition directly, which is what I do. We're on a payment plan, and so that's the piece. When you say I can't afford to go, if your parents don't have any money, you will go for free because the government will pay for you.
But your grades have to have some sort of reflection of
not
that.
necessarily. So I'm glad you said that because then there's 2 different types of scholarships. So there's need-based scholarship, which is what Dawn is referring to, and then there's merit-based, which is based on your grades, right? But there are a lot more need scholarships, believe it or not, than there is merit. So, we're telling the students, and they should, because sometimes they're looking at a combination of both. So like, let's use Questbridge Scholars, which is a need-based scholarship, but they're looking for high-achieving students. So in a program like that also covers their tuition and it matches them to top-tier colleges, your Ivy Leagues, your USCs, your all of those schools. They're looking at a combination of both, but if they don't have the need, I don't care how high your GPA is, you can't qualify for that scholarship. So in that case, it's good that I tell students, this is, if you are a student of color and your parents are poor and you are smart and get good grades, this your season.
Absolutely.
It's your season.
But what about the children who, that's not the factor?
But
Then
they're
what?
smart and they qualify, right?
that are, you mean merit-based? Like they're smart, they're
Correct.
high
Yeah,
achievers.
merit-based.
So yeah, so then there are merit-based scholarships as well that, and sometimes the colleges do that and on their own.
Right.
So for example, University of Alabama's like, hey, you got a 4.0 GPA or this test score, we're automatically going to give you the presidential scholarship, and that is, you know, $30,000.
That's a full ride.
It pretty much a full ride,
Right.
right? And that's based on their merit, based on their grades, and they do that automatically when they're applied. And Howard does
And
that
Howard,
as well.
yes,
You know,
yes.
our daughters attend Howard. Howard does that as well. So
Right.
to the people listening, you got to make sure you take that test score. So that's the thing with a lot of the HBCUs. It is the merit, but it's not just the GPA. It also means that they have to take the SAT or ACT as well,
Right.
or they
Be high
can't be
achieving in that as well.
right.
Okay.
So that they have to have that test in order to qualify for the highest scholarships, the presidential scholarships, and that makes a difference.
Right.
And that makes a difference. So
Yeah.
I tell the students, being both, you know, now this is your season. This is not the time to make up, you know, because you want to impress your friends with your parents make, and they don't really make that.
Right.
Now it's the, you know, nope, my parents make 30,000 proudly.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
this is not that time.
That's
Because
right.
I had students, and I've worked in different demographics, and then when I worked in like inner city urban, that, you know, students wanted to flex. They didn't want their friends to know that, you know, their
It's
parents
not
didn't
time to
make a
flex.
You're like, now
Right.
it's not the time to make
Who do they
up.
think was reading that anyway?
Right.
You know, it's just this
Not
the
no
teenage
student.
mindset,
Absolutely.
right? You know, these are the
Absolutely.
same, you know, and a lot of times the parents feed into that too, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, first of all, I work in how you have 4 pair of Jordans and like, I know you want free lunch. So, but they feed into that, and so
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
the thing. So it's like really educating them, like, this is what it means. I was talking to a student the other day, and she was just like, you know, but my parents don't have money, and she has like a 3.8 GPA on a 4.0 scale. She was just like, my parents don't have money, so I don't think that I can go to college. And I'm like, that's why you can go to college,
That's why
because
you
your parents
can.
don't have
Right.
money. You have a great
Yes.
GPA. But a lot of times the students just aren't informed. You know, they see what their friends are doing or what they see other people doing,
Right.
and they make assumptions. And so that's why I love this role and why I'm passionate about it, because I was a first generation college student. So I knew what it was like to feel like you wanted to do something but not really know exactly how. So it was just kind of like, you know, I tell my students I was just kind of like this and figuring it along.
Right.
So thankfully, you know, there were support programs, but we didn't really have like a dedicated college counselor that sat with us, pulled us out, talked about it or whatever.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, you're smart getting this program.
Yeah, we
And
didn't have that
these
either.
are-
I don't think
Right.
one person pulled me out of class
No.
to talk to me about college
No.
at all whatsoever. So I was one of those kids that completely fell through the cracks. In December of my senior year, raced to
Did you
apply.
have a desire to go to college?
I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right,
I just was
right.
doing my job of going to school, being a good
Right.
kid, and you know, sometimes the not good kid, I wasn't like perfect, but the good kids fall through the cracks because if you're
Absolutely.
not in trouble and you're just
Absolutely.
doing your thing day to day, nobody's paying attention.
Absolutely.
So
Very true.
they didn't spend the time to like pull me out and take me, but I did go to junior college
Yeah.
and then ended up getting stuck there and
and
not.
that's the thing.
And that's what I was saying. That's the
That's
shitty
the
feeling of everybody
I
left.
agree.
And I was like,
I
wait a
agree.
minute, I'm
I agree.
smart. I know.
Yeah.
I could have totally gone that route. And I
I
felt
agree.
completely robbed. To this day,
I
I
agree.
still am a little pissed
Yeah.
off. But
Well, you can always go back. And I
well, no, I don't want to go back now. But I remember my neighbor at the time when I graduated high school. She was like a professor or something, and my parents work in the entertainment industry, so they weren't, you know, they just weren't college people, and they were still young when I was graduating high school. So she came over to bring me my little graduation gift, and my parents had bought me a car. And she was like, they bought you a car, and you're not going to a 4-year college? And handed me my
feel
gift.
bad.
Yes, I will never
she
forget that. They were like,
Wow.
they bought you a car, you're not going to college?
Oh,
I was
wow.
thinking, like,
Wow.
first of all, I didn't even know about college until
Wow.
yesterday. But to
Wow.
this day, that woman still pisses me
Oh,
off.
my
that she
goodness.
Wow.
So I'm very adamant about my children. I'm
Yeah.
for, you know, at least having the option or knowing what is available to them
Absolutely.
because they are very smart and if college is their route or a job and leaving at 18. That's
Right.
what
Whichever
Right.
one.
Yeah, whichever
Right.
one. But I think you brought up an important point, and I will say that all college counseling and all college counselors are not created equal.
Yeah, and this was in the 90s. It was
Right.
a little different.
Absolutely.
And even today, I
It has
think.
nothing to do with having compassion for a child.
Yeah.
And not
Well,
knowing.
it's just
And guidance and direction.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but even Michelle Obama talked about that
Oh,
in
yeah.
her book about how
That's
her
right.
guidance counselor was like, you can't go.
Oh,
try
I
to
remember that. I
see-
read
Try
that.
to discourage
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
And so, but I know that it's like for the students that are going to come on their own, a lot of times, because people just really don't know, right? It's
Yeah.
a lot to know,
Mhm.
right? And it changes, the landscape changes constantly. So if you're not really passionate about that part of the profession
Mhm.
and really keeping up on it and learning,
Right.
it's easy to ill-advise students, right? And so and I tell I tell adults on my campus, respectfully, I don't come in your classroom and try to teach.
Yes.
While I have a teaching credential,
Right.
I don't come in your classroom and try
Right.
to, please don't advise them, because you're giving them your 25, 30-year-old information, and that was true maybe then.
Right.
But that is very different
Yeah,
now.
the landscape
Right.
has
Right,
changed.
it's just
Right.
very different.
That's good.
And
It's
so,
very different.
yeah, and so the thing is just making sure, like you said, giving students informed decisions and making sure with that. And I think that this is what comes to my success, because people ask me this a lot, because I present for the district and do all this stuff. And I said the thing is building relationships
Oh yeah.
and building trust with students. And so it's one thing for me to tell you, I go into all the 12th grade classrooms, which is a large fee because we're 2,300 in my high school.
Wow.
And so I go into every single junior classroom, I go into every single senior classroom, do a whole presentation, the whole nine. It means nothing though, right? Because if the student doesn't really understand what this means for me,
Right.
then it was just
personalize it.
exactly, it was just womp 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 womp, the Charlie Brown thing, right? And so when you call a student out and you're really getting to know their story and where they are, because students are still at this age going to make fear-based decisions. And so the thing is, it's like I don't know, and it seems overwhelming, and I know I just won't do it. Right. So it's giving them the assurance that, listen, don't just not do it because you feel like you don't know.
Right.
Let's talk about it. Let's walk through. So in addition to having that conversation, then it's backed up with the support. Then I have workshops. And okay, this is the workshop for this application. This is the workshop for that application, right? Because now I'm providing them that support that now takes away that fear. Sometimes they just really need to sit and they can figure out a lot of it on their own,
Yeah.
but they need somebody there so
Right.
that they feel that kind of comfort. So that was an important point you brought up about that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I ended up driving all the way up to Pierce College because I didn't want to go to Santa Monica because everybody was going to Santa
everyone was
Monica, and
going to
I
Santa
want to have the
Monica.
feeling of going somewhere. So I
Right.
drove to the valley.
In your graduation gift.
Yeah, my graduation gift card.
Yeah.
But see, I kind of have the same story as you, where, first I went to more than one college, and I was kind of embarrassed to say that because I started out at Southern University, and I had the worst year there, not academically, but socially. It was not the best time for me, and so I came home because I was just intimidated about the process and the environment, and I was so far away from home.
Yeah.
But I came back, I worked, I tried to go to junior college. I hated it because I was like, I just came from a 4-year college
Yeah.
where I know that I can get in somewhere. Why am I here? So I poo-pooed that, quit that, and just started working. And then summer came around, and my friends came home, and then they were going back, and I was feeling so horrible. I just made the decision, to get myself together, and I applied to Clark, and that's where I ended up graduating from.
nice.
But that wasn't my only school, Southern. I went to Southern, and then I went to Norfolk. But I went to Norfolk not because I really wanted to go there. I went there because I had a friend there, and I was just trying
Just
to
trying
get
to find
away,
your
trying
way.
to figure
Yeah.
it out. out.
Yeah.
And I wasted a lot of time, and I ended up graduating much later than I probably should have, but I graduated, thank God.
Yeah.
But that's just my story. I was just saying that I went through that same emotional
Absolutely.
that you
Yeah.
went through.
Mhm.
So
I love that you shared that story, because when I go into the classrooms and I talk to the juniors, I talk to them about finding a fit for them. Like, and I give them the example. I try to meet them as much as I can in my mature age. I try to meet them as much as I can where they are. So we have conversations about it. I said, listen, don't choose a college because your best friend is gonna go and y'all gonna have a cute room and we gonna decorate and all
Or
that.
your boyfriend.
And then that's when I say, are your boyfriend going? He love me and we're gonna be together. You know, and I tell them like that, right? We have the conversation like that. And I say, and then y'all broke up by prom and you was your best friend. And now y'all at the same school for 40 years. And you gotta look at them for 4 years, right? And I say, but you know, that's a very real thing. And so I told them, I said, we're saying this jokingly, yes, I'm funny, but that's like, these are real things that happen, right?
Yeah.
And so there's always someone, a teacher or somebody in the room is like, I absolutely made a decision that way. Just because they don't know how else to do it. If nobody's guiding you, then how else do you know how to
I
make
was
those
first
decisions?
generation in my household going to college.
Yeah, and that was the same thing. And you know, we didn't have the internet and we didn't have all that. So they have all that at their disposal. They have all of you can do virtual views now. I mean, virtual tours on campus when you can't go and all that kind of stuff. We had a book this big and it had a paragraph about the college on it, right? And it had a paragraph, and that was what we used. And unless you had a couple of reps that came and kind of exposed you. So I think, even for me, one of the stories I tell my students is, I thought I was going to UC Davis, and you know, at the time they were really recruiting, you know, students of color to come, so they flew me out.
They still are.
They flew me out and schmoozed me for a spring break and all this, and then I got there and I was like, what is that smell? And they were like, it's the cows. And I was like, there are cows. Like,
We're like, aren't I in California?
And that was my thing. I was like, I'm in California. What do you mean? And it's like, and why is the pizza parlor have onions and stick on the pizza? And this is not Pizza Hut. And like, and what are we doing? It was just different, right? It was a college town. It wasn't something I was accustomed to. And I thought in California, this is going to be the same as where I live. It's going to look like home. And it didn't. And so for me, that was like, I almost got ran over by, like legit, I almost got ran over by a bike. I was like, this is too much. Like, she like talk about too old. I was not even old and I was too old for that. I was like, I am not getting run over by bikes. Like, this is too much. And so I did so, but for me, I had the privilege of having that experience. I would have otherwise known no different, and I probably would have been in the same situation. I probably would have come home and had to figure it out again, right? And so I think that given that experience, I share that with the students and say, listen, like, you have to find a place that is going to fit you. If we're in this room together and there are 30 of you guys and I got 2 students asking me questions and I know 25 of y'all have questions, you are not going to go to a UCLA because everybody think they want to go to UCLA. You and 200 other 1,000 applicants that think they want to go. You're going to get in a room and you have a freshman seminar of 1,000 students. You are not going to get the help you need if you're not going to ask the questions. And so is that really a fit? You may need to be at a University of San Francisco. When you miss too many classes, they're going to really call your mama. They really call you. And so they're going to really call your mom, and the professor like, hey, so you didn't miss 3 classes, so what's going on? Or they have somebody that's going, you like, oh, I missed tacos, and they're going to go get you tacos. Like, that's not, UCLA can care less. I'm just being honest. So that is not going to happen. Right? So it's
understanding the culture of the school. Because, you know, not only do you have students go and have those issues of just being lost, but the weather.
Absolutely.
You know, you go somewhere. Like I was there, you know, for homecoming at Howard, and that Monday I was still there, and my daughter, I was like, "Why are you still here?" She's like, "It is 42 degrees outside." You know, she's like, "Give me a minute." And she's like,
Wait a minute. When you 2 met at work, you found out then that your daughters both went to Howard?
Yes.
Oh, how cool.
Yes, and we're friends and
have known each other.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
So we didn't even know. But those are the things, you know, paying attention to if especially if you're coming from somewhere like California.
Absolutely.
And even in California, because when my husband was in the Bay, he was in an area, it was always foggy.
Yeah.
And it was so depressing.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to pay attention to, is it going to be too hot? Is it going to be too cold? Is it going to be too foggy? Like, all of those things will play into your college
and really matter. And I think you brought up a great point, because especially now with the mental health issues since the pandemic, it is very, very significant and important to make sure, number one, that the college has the supports that you need. And number two, understanding yourself and who you are. Because my daughter now being at Howard, she was like, I realized that like I need the sunshine. Like I feel depressed in weathers when it's like when it's cold all the time. And I had an intern who lived in Connecticut his entire life and had been extremely depressed, and found out that he had seasonal depression, like he couldn't be in there.
That is a thing. Yeah, I've heard about
And
it.
he was just like, I mean, I now am an adult, and he's lived there his whole life, and then it was like, this was the problem the whole time.
Wow.
And he's like, came to California doing just fine. Right?
That's crazy.
And so just really having them to know yourself. Don't do it because a friend is doing you, because somebody. I still haven't figured out who somebody is, but I always
there's always somebody.
Somebody told me.
I
don't know who somebody is.
Or I always say, who is they? Who is they? Like they said.
They.
Who
And
is
I'm always
they?
like, who is that? And so
Right.
just them really understanding themselves
Yeah,
and
that's
where
really
like
good.
and I said, and not your utopian self. Like we have these grand things, like, you know, in my utopian world, I'm gonna work out at night. You know, but I'm really not.
I'm
right?
wake up early and work out.
Well, I wanted to get up early and work out, but I'm not gonna do it after work because I'm too
tired.
tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired at the end of the day. And so just really understanding like who are you now in this moment, because that's who you're taking with you
That's
when
so
you
good.
walk on campus for the first time.
Absolutely.
So knowing that, like, and if you grow to those, not to say don't work toward those things, but you have to be honest and have real conversations with who you are and what your circumstances are and what that's going to look like for you.
Right.
So, you know, the money is one thing, you know, the when to apply and when to start, all those are other things. But like first we have to figure out where you fit first.
Yeah.
And then we can backwards plan all the rest of that kind
That's
of
really
stuff.
good.
And finding the schools that fit you and creating a list and then working the other stuff.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of a disadvantage for kids who are first generation, because they just
Absolutely.
don't know, their parents don't know. I fell
Absolutely.
into that because
Me
I didn't know.
too.
I just picked something.
Right.
I picked Southern, and I happened to get there, and one of my girlfriends that I still am friends with was at the school. But I mean, I didn't know anything about there. And when I got there, it was rainy. Oh my God, it was so behind the times. Sorry for everyone who's from Louisiana, but I hated it. It was hard to get off campus. You know, I met some good people there, but oh my God, trying to make sure that you find a school that's a good fit is really key. What I did do is that while I was at Southern, I was able to take a trip to Atlanta, and I went to Clark, and that's when I knew.
When your
I was
lip
like,
turned up. When you
but I remember that feeling. I remember that feeling when I went there. I was like, this is it. This is where I'm
Now,
at.
had you visited Southern before?
No.
I
I just picked something.
Yeah.
Because I
See,
wanted
that's
to
what
go to
happened.
school.
That's a huge
and it was just always a thing. I'm going to college. I didn't have any like, I'm going to stop and or graduate from high school and then go to work. I just knew that I was going to college. I just didn't know where. And to be quite honest, my grades were not 100% great to get into the actual schools that I wanted to. So I had to go to Southern because I had like
That's
a
what you
2
got.
something. So I got in there, and so I went because I knew that I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I went there. I went somewhere else, but when I visited Atlanta, I knew.
You knew.
In my spirit, I was like, this is
Yeah.
where I'm going to come back.
Yeah.
And that's where I did. I went there
And that's so
and I graduated.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
so important to make sure. I know now, whenever we go somewhere and there's a university there,
You stop
we
by.
stop.
Yeah.
We stop
Yeah.
to visit. Everywhere we go, when
That's
we're
smart.
with our kids, when we're traveling, we stop and we visit the schools.
Absolutely.
Because we want them to see. And I remember we went on this full on, like speaking of Connecticut, we had visited a friend in Connecticut, and we did like a full on Ivy League tour. We went to 4 of them. And each campus, we would get there, my daughter was like, nope. And it was like beautiful. Like we were at Brown. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna come here.
Right.
You know, we went to Columbia, we went to Harvard, we went to Yale. And my daughter was just like, nope. And what it was that she was wanting to attend an HBCU.
Absolutely. That's my
And
daughter,
so
too.
even though we
Yeah.
were at these beautiful historic campuses, and that was at the time when Malia was attending Harvard, it was beautiful, and I was like, oh,
She knows herself.
but she and the other piece was that she was not raised in LA. She was raised in Arizona. And she had those experiences where she was the only one.
Yes.
Very often.
Yes.
She had
My
her
daughter,
crew of other Black friends, but for the most part, she was the only one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so even like she would say around Black History Month or whenever they're learning something sad about Black people, everybody's turning looking at her
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
oh, I'm sorry that happened. You know, so she was just over that.
Yeah.
And
She wanted
it
to be around
didn't
her
matter
people.
that we were at Yale and Harvard and all of these other places. That's not what she was
She's
wanting.
looking for a connection.
She
Absolutely.
was wanting, and what was cool was that on a couple of those campuses there were Black students that were given the tours, but she
You're like,
knew,
see,
and that's what I did. I was like,
Right.
take a picture. She was like, I need you to stop. And I was like, and he's handsome too. She was like, I really need you to stop. But that's so important. You need to
Yes.
understand what you want, because you'll get there, and it's going to be hard.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
It is going to be hard,
Absolutely.
no matter where you are. But if all of the other stuff doesn't align
It's
with
harder.
who
Absolutely.
you are, it's going to make it even more of a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's why I always tell students that when they're like trying to make a decision, if they have the resources, I'm like, get to the
Visit.
campus, because
Yes.
I believe just how you said. I tell them, I said, I think there's just something in your knower
Yeah.
that when you get there,
Yes.
you are just
Know
going
it.
to know, like, this is a fit
Yes.
for me.
Yes.
Like, I feel at home. I feel like I can do my thing, because everything else is going to be challenging.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Without
gonna be hard.
a doubt.
It's
Right.
gonna
Life
be
is
hard.
going to life.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Adulting is going to be
Oh,
adulting.
yeah.
And so if
School
you
is
don't
going
at
to
least
school.
exactly. And so if you don't
Yeah.
at least have the assurance of feeling like you belong in a place, then you just are not going to give your best. You're not going to
That's
be
right.
able to make it through those challenges. So that's one of the, and I was adamant with that about my daughter, because I was a first generation college student, and being in the generation we were in, and you didn't have much to really go on. You was just like kind of like, I don't know, that looks good, that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah.
They said, I
Yeah.
heard.
Right.
You know, that was our college research. The
Yeah.
college
Yeah.
research was they said,
Yeah.
I heard.
My friend
The
going too.
and the paragraph in the book. That's really all you
Yeah.
had.
That's really
And
funny.
so for me, it was just like, and my mom not knowing, there's a whole nother burden being a first generation college student than there is for everyone else. For one, if you don't have the guidance, then that's a whole thing, right? But then you carry a different level with you on your shoulders, and a different level of fear of failure.
Right. And
Yeah, it's all the
insecurities.
pressure.
Exactly,
Right.
because if I fail,
You're doing it for everybody who needs you.
everybody, but also people not understanding that, like, I don't know what it takes because I didn't go, right? So they're supporting in their way of support,
Right.
but not really knowing what support looks like
That is
because
so
they've never been there. And so I tell families that I sit down with, I said, listen, and part of my dissertation for my doctorate was on college access for students of color, and they get accepted, but they don't matriculate. So what happens, right? There's that whole period. It's like, we've done a good job now after decades, probably 3 decades of like, you can go to college, and everybody's doing this whole cheer and song and dance, right? So now they're like, okay, I can go, but then now what? You know, I got accepted, but now what does this mean? And they don't have the feeling, the blanks, right, in between. And so you have these families who are like, especially if you stay at home, like I told, that is the worst decision for a first generation college student is to be like, oh, I'm gonna commute to CSUN. No, you're not.
I tried to
because
do
the
that.
first time
Oh,
it
my
rains,
You gonna stay home.
you stay at home. The
That's
first
right.
time it's too hot. I'm not meeting my study group because,
That's right.
or I'm not going to my professor's office hours. And if you don't have the backing of people who have done it, who can
Right.
tell you,
Your
no,
mama
you
gonna
need
want
to
you
go
to
to that.
babysit your younger sibling.
Exactly, and that's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And as parents, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like we're all parents, so as parents,
Mhm.
you think about, and I'm honest with myself, and I tell the parents, like, have a real conversation with yourself, especially if your kid drives and you have been Uber for however many years. You like
Right.
take your little brother to baseball
Yes,
practice
absolutely.
because I'm too old for that, right? I don't want to like no, and you have to be honest with
Right.
yourself about
Yeah.
that. That's
Right.
really, or clean this room or whatever.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
You're just
Take
robbing
out
them
the
of the whole
trash,
experience.
yeah.
Exactly,
Right.
because
Right.
but not intentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Intentionally.
especially if you don't know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
so there's that whole, it's that
Or
whole
sometimes intentionally. 'Cause
thing.
you're like, I don't want
Mhm.
to there.
That's true.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't want
That's
to. You
true.
don't want to
You
let
don't
them
let
go.
go.
That's
Right.
true.
Or you even have students who are feeling responsible for their
Yeah.
parents.
Absolutely.
There was a student
How's
last
my mom
year.
gonna get
Absolutely.
this? How
Yes,
do
they
you
were
do
saying.
that?
Yes.
There were a couple students last year who had got accepted into HBCUs on the East Coast, and they're like, "But I don't want to leave my mom. She needs help with my
Yeah.
brother.
Yes.
I don't
It's
want
messed
to
up.
leave my mom. She's never been alone."
Yes.
I would say
Yeah.
I would say you're so sweet,
Right.
But you need
but
to
your
live your
mother.
life.
That's not. She wants you to go.
Yes.
She wants you to go, and you will be able to better help her
Mm-hmm.
After that. Yeah.
after.
Absolutely.
But you need to go and you need to live your life, and I think that's the piece that, especially first generation,
Absolutely.
you know, and so for parents to be able to let them go, I experienced that as well.
Mhm.
You know, same thing at
Mhm.
home, thinking I'm going to commute to CSUN, and my mom was like, "Well, what about your sister?" When I had gotten into a summer program, she's like, "Well, what about your sister?" I'm like, "Are you for real?" I mean,
Yeah.
so this really happens.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
this really happens. That
Yes.
responsibility of feeling as though if I leave, who's going to take care of my younger siblings?
Mhm.
Who's going to take care of my mom? That should not be
On the kid.
your responsibility as a young adult. You should be able to make decisions free of that.
Mhm.
And I know that's difficult, but I was there and in that place as well, and I had to leave.
Mhm.
I had to leave, and I know a lot of friends who were first generation and they had to leave because otherwise you get stuck.
Absolutely.
You
Then
absolutely.
you taking care of a light
And-
bill. And
Yes.
Exactly. And I think the
Yes.
thing too is, and that's part of one of the issues with community college too, right? Because that
Mhm.
by nature, because there's no dorms in 90-something
Right.
percent of them, that
Absolutely.
you automatically fall into that. But to piggyback on what you were saying, as a first generation college student and why you have that gap, the things that happen in the summer as well becomes a thing. My grandmother, who I was very close to, and we stayed on the same premises, passed 2 days before I graduated high school. And it was that whole thing, leaving my family, leaving my
Right,
mother, feeling that
right.
sense
Feel
of
the
responsibility to be able to, you know, to be there to take care of it. And I see it all the time, where especially students who are like, I had a student who was in foster youth. His mom had lost custody. He was taking care of little brother, and then I guess the mom came back into his life, and when she did, it was like he was still kind of in the system, and so he got a certain amount of money, and that's how they were paying for their place. And he's like, if I leave and I go to school,
Yes.
my mother and my older sister and my mother and little brother won't have a place to live.
Yeah, the burden.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and so that's the thing, and it's very real. And they're just things too that parents, like first generation parents, just don't know. Like my mom was like, "You can't go here, you can't go there," and I was in San Diego, so I was only 2 hours away. And my mom didn't understand why I wouldn't come home every weekend. I'm like, I gotta study. Like I don't do this, or she's like,
That's
you
what
said-
the suicide fight show was in your friend. She was just somebody would have told me, Kimmy got me.
She's like, listen,
Yeah.
I called you. You said you got out of class at 12, and I called you at
Oh,
12:30, and I'm like, I didn't come straight
Right.
home from class.
Right.
But it's just that closer to home. And she was like, wanted me to go to USC. I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But like, I need to have that distance.
She
But
wasn't easy
supported.
access.
Yeah.
but she wouldn't even let me apply to like HBCU to go. I wanted to go. She's like, oh no, we don't know people out there.
And yeah, sometimes
That's the
parents
thing.
putting their
My
fears on
parents
their
wanted me to
kids.
go, especially my father. They was like, "Oh, I thought you was gonna stay here when you left." I was like, "No."
Yeah.
But to speak to feeling like you belong to a place, when I did get to Clark, I was a straight A student.
See,
Oh,
Wow,
yay.
but it makes a difference.
But it made a
though.
difference because I felt
Right.
like that was my place, and I was
Exactly.
Yep.
And you wanted to
Exactly.
because I excelled, and I wanted to be
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to you getting flown out to UC Davis.
Yes.
So is that still happening as far as affirmative action? Because with the
Oh, yeah.
Supreme Court's
That's
decision,
a
how
good
did that affect, or how do you think that's going to affect kids in the future? Because I have freshmen and 8th graders.
So, my honest opinion, and you know, this is my disclaimer. It has nothing to do with anybody else, and this is what I feel. I do feel like it's going to have an effect.
Okay.
I do honestly feel like the college landscape is reverting back. And I do feel like it will ultimately be
That's
an
sad.
elite thing again. Is what I feel like. Now, of course, you know, all of the rhetoric and narrative right now is that it's not going to change anything that we're doing, and you know, blah blah blah. But how can it not?
Right, because it's
Right.
not there. They don't have to.
How can it not?
They don't have to.
They don't have to.
Right.
And so now, do those programs still exist where they're doing diversity fly-in and all of that? Yes. But I just find it ironic that we spend all this time building all of these diversity, equity, and inclusion
Right.
departments and creating these jobs, you know, and all of this, you know, now all of a sudden.
It's like taking the bottom out of everything.
Exactly.
Right,
So it's
right.
like, what are you going to do? So I think you'll start seeing those things disappear and dissipate over time. But right now they're still in place. So while they're there, you know, I tell students take advantage of it.
Even the HBCUs offer that.
Right.
I have a friend who's there now, and her daughter is a swimmer, and Howard flew her out.
Yeah.
You know,
hmm
and they were going to give her a full ride, and she ended up accepting. But
But
that's
she's
still
not black,
happening.
right?
She was black.
Wait, how does that work though?
But I mean, it's
At
a black
Howard,
university,
at
so
Howard, yeah,
I know, but
HBCUs also do the flyouts.
No, okay, but I wasn't talking about just being flown out. I was talking about because they were recruiting people of color.
Diversity.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So then, if that is off the table, then we're looking at. I'm trying to set myself up. Merit based. So I'm, you know, all of my children, we stress academics and make sure that they're, you know, respectful and have a great reputation, things like that. So I have a two-part question. The academics, where do they need to be to get in anywhere? And also the volunteering, because they said, put them in Girl Scouts, put them in this, put them in that.
Yeah.
So are people still, you know, putting their kids in a bunch of different activities for college? Is that still a thing? I know the landscape changes, but is that still a thing? And then also sports.
So this is the breakdown. With most schools that are doing what they call a comprehensive review of students, and they're looking at everything. They're looking at their grade point average as one, and it depends. The answer to that is it depends in terms of where their grades need to be, because it depends on where they're aspiring to attend.
Okay.
So if you're talking about your, if you're on a 4.0 scale and you're talking about Ivy Leagues, yes, the average GPA is a 4 point plus, and
Right.
the extra
4.5.
points are.
Yeah. So I have one
Classes.
child.
You
I have
to
one
take
child
an
that is
AP
like that
honors.
now. He's in the 9th grade and calculates everything, takes all the honor classes because he wants to be above a 4.5. But in the 9th grade, does it start at that point, or where can I tell him?
That was mine.
I mean, I know he's gonna do it regardless, but how can I cool his jets? You know, in
So-
all of the.
So this is what I tell students. When you get over the 4.1, 4.2, they get it, right?
Okay.
And so you want to be a well-balanced student. So if you have good grades and you're not involved in anything, then they're like,
What's wrong?
well, yeah, if you're not doing nothing else, then
You
you
should
should
have
be.
more.
So
getting
the well,
more
and that's what you mean by
Yes.
the landscape, because now the
Exactly.
essay writing and all that, they want to see the whole person.
All that.
not just-
Absolutely.
So-
Yes. Absolutely. So
Yes.
they're looking, so the grades are one part, and then they're looking at sustained activity. So if you can't, and I had a niece like this, and she was like, this semester I'm in this, I did softball, yeah, I didn't like that. Then I did basketball, nobody liked that. So then I was in the art club, I didn't like that. And so they like, land somewhere, please. And so
Yes.
like, yes, it's a time of discovery, but you at least want to have one or two things that you've dedicated yourself to. And I asked my students, I said, why do you think that they want that? Because they want to know that you are going to stay
Yeah,
when you
committed.
get there, that you are
Yeah.
going to commit to something.
Right.
Right? So,
Okay.
and I get students all the time who've been accepted to a 4-year and be like, yeah, I'm going to go to this school with the plan to transfer. And I'm like, no. Because it's a lot harder to transfer from
Yes.
4-year to 4-year than if you're at a community college, because it was designed
To
right
transfer.
for transfer purposes. That was the purpose of it. So that's going to depend. Now, in terms of when they start looking at grades, the reason why I said it depends. If you're looking at an Ivy League or a private school, private schools calculate your GPA from 9th grade
Okay.
all
so
the
I
way
have-
to
So I have one of those.
private universities. So they're
Ninth
looking from
grade.
9th grade to 11th grade. Now, students are always like, Dr. Scott, I'm going to get a 4.0 in 12th grade. I'm like, that's great. That's going to
That's-
keep
yeah.
your college admission. But they're
Right.
never going
It's
to
not
see
gonna
that
help
while
you.
you're applying.
Right.
Like I said, the application deadlines are now. They don't have any
Yeah.
grades
So
yet.
9th grade to
Right.
11th. That's fine.
But they do when they get those. The reason they say it's conditional, because the condition is that you continue to be the student that you were when we admitted you.
Right.
If that changes and now you're taking 6 classes of underwater basket weaving and diving, that's my example all the time.
Underwater basket
So
weaving.
listen,
That
they're
is
like,
funny.
they're like,
Wait,
what?
so-
And TA.
What type of
and
activities
early-
can it be? If it's
So I'm just talking about their class changes,
oh,
right?
gotcha.
Like
So
as
if
a
you're like,
senior,
oh, I
just
took
blow it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're like your son. You said sorry. He's like, oh, 9th grade. I took 4 AP classes, and then I took dual enrollment, and
Yeah.
I did this and that, and then I got to 12th grade, and now I have 6 periods of underwater basketball.
Oh,
and they
gotcha.
like,
Yeah.
Right.
and
you're
so
just
they're
trying
like,
to get in.
yeah,
Right.
and
then,
so
yeah.
But
they're
what
like-
other activities should they be doing?
So the activities this is a myth that students are like, I have to be involved in the activities that align to what I'm
Yeah,
gonna
no,
do.
we want to well
Like,
rounded.
yeah, it's whatever they're interested in and they're going to dedicate themselves to and that they enjoy being involved in, because when they get ready to talk about it, they are going to need to be able to express it. And I've read for, scholarships for application, and I can tell like by the way you talk about it, or
Right.
if you're just listing activities because you were just trying to resume fill, as I call
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
then like, no, I really enjoyed this. This is what I did. This is, how involved I was. Then that makes a difference, right? So finding, and it's okay to have some activities where you're like, yeah, I did this only for a year and I realized it wasn't something I really wanted to do. Fine. But what did you find that you like to do and that you continue to do, right? And then it's the leadership in that too. So that is so key, and that is a really important part that they miss out on, is the leadership part, because they want to know that who's coming here and is going to do something great and amazing, right? So I tell students all the time, I said, listen, President Obama went to Occidental. He did not get a degree from there. Do you think that Occidental from now until the Lord comes back
Right,
is going
right,
to
right,
use
right.
that in their
Right.
marketing? And they're
Right.
like, we saw something in
attendance,
him.
right.
We saw his leadership skill.
I love it.
And we are in
When they was really showing or not.
Exactly.
They're gonna have his
Exactly.
picture on the
Right.
application.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because
Yeah.
I actually asked the admission department that when they came and did a presentation for our school, and they were like, absolutely, you bet you we are.
Right.
But that's what
He
they're
has a
looking
wing
for,
named after
right?
him.
And so this is what
Right.
I tell students, and it also, I think, helps to take the pressure off. And when I say, listen, this is a 2-part process. Yes, you want the college to accept you, but when you start getting into that application, now it's really marketing and branding and talking about what you did and presenting that in a way that they understand who you are.
Right.
So when we go back to activities, and I'll use my underwater basket weaving for activities too, because I do
I
this with my
love it.
students, I tell them, listen, because you were on the football team, you could have rolled the bench the whole time.
Right.
Then what does that mean? Or
Right.
never showed
Right.
up to practice?
Right.
That means nothing. But when you can say, you know, I was in underwater basket weave, I started the third weave, and because of that, like I trained all of my teammates on how to
It's
do
a
the
still a
weave.
leadership position.
And then we became national championships. So you're telling
Right.
them what
Right.
we became, right? Because
Yes.
of
Because
my
of what you
involvement,
did.
because of my
Yes.
dedication and what I offered. And I said, and when you're presenting your application, that's what you're presenting. This is who I am. I'm an asset to your campus, and you're welcome.
Oh, love
Yes.
it.
Absolutely.
So good.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Mhm.